right. Welcome back to the Calibrate Show. My name's Hunter France. Today we're going to talk about the trumpets, really get into that discussion after the bumper. Welcome back. Hope you enjoyed that. That's a song by Status Quo, one of the best bands of all time. You can check them out. That's the song beginning or the end. We're going to be doing some of the trumpets today. So this whole video might come across as Hunter's a little bit confused. And admittedly, I think what we're just going to talk about today is the timing of the trumpets and who it's targeted at. I'm a little less confused about who it's targeted at. I'm a little more confused about the timing. And admittedly, I know I said in the other videos in this series that the book of Revelation is not that complicated. You kind of just have to take it for what it says. This is probably the only part in the book where it is a little bit confusing. So it really it centers around the whole timing aspect of this thing. There's really not anything I've found, at least in the Old Testament, that gives us an order of events. It talks about plagues, it talks about fire, pestilence, it talks about judgment, earth shaking, but it doesn't really give it in sequential order, not like the book of Revelation does. So we go through the first 6 seals. We talked about the 6th seal yesterday, and today we're talking about the 7th seal. And it's not until the 7th seal opens that John sees these trumpets come out. So I favor the sequential order, the chronological order of events. Read it as it is given. I believe that. I'm not overly dogmatic about this part, but I do believe that. The 6th seal is when you see the signs in the sky. The day of the Lord has begun. The sky is opened up. You flip the page over, and the 144,000 are now sealed. And you have this multitude from every tribe, nation, and language being gathered together unto him. Now, the return of Jesus is a complex sequence of events. It takes time. You get to the 5th trumpet, and it happens over a 5-month period. Now, there's different explanations for all this. There's the pre-wrath camp and the post-trib camp, and they have some subtle differences, but they're not that different. But in the pre-wrath, I think this is probably where I'm a little more pre-wrath, would suggest that Jesus can come back during the time of Jacob's trouble, that second 3.5 years at any moment. But most of them suggest that it's probably that final year. I don't know if Travis Snow is in the final year camp, but he does have a book. I need to get it and read it. It's going to be very interesting, and who knows, we might revisit this topic one day. But he talks about how Jesus is likely to come back and re-fulfill Passover. I think Nelson Walters even added this into one of his videos. I watch him sometimes. Some of his just strictly Bible content is really good. I think sometimes and I struggle with this too. Anytime you study the end times, you have to really balance yourself, because you can get really caught up into a lot of conspiracy theories and hyper sensationalism. It's not that people aren't conspiring, but people have been conspiring for thousands of years. It's nothing new. But as long as we're looking in the Middle East. So that's kind of the timing talk about this. If you want to know my stance of do they overlap or not? Well, I think they could overlap. So you'll see later in the trumpets, there's some things that seem to be the same language being used in the 6th seal. However, they don't show up until the 7th seal. There's some back and forth there. We also have Paul in 1 Corinthians 15, verse 52, when he talks about, at the last trumpet, we will all be changed in the twinkling of an eye. And he talks about our new immortal bodies. Now, in that passage, I don't think, maybe I should do a word study on this, but I don't actually think Paul is saying that the trumpet blasts, it's not necessarily that trumpet blasts and now all of this happens, because in the 6th seal it happens. But by the 7th trumpet, it's all done, and all the resurrected people are resurrected and with him, and he's on the throne, and it's over. The mystery of God is now complete, and we will be revealed in glory with him. And it's all done. But do you see where this can get a little bit confusing? Because Paul does seem to suggest that it is at the last trumpet that this begins. But we also read in the book of Revelation, it began at the sixth seal. And the way it is written, even in the ancient languages, the word when you see and then I saw literally means then, like, or after that I saw this. And to me, that tells me it's chronological fashion. It's chronological order. It's the seals. Then the seventh one opens, and then the angels come out. But do you see how this can get a little bit confusing? Admittedly, it is confusing. And so I favor the chronological order, but I'm not overly dogmatic about it. I don't want to get too bogged down there. People can get really bogged down in that, and the discussion can take hours, and you really get nothing done. So I want to move this along, and I want to talk about the target of the trumpets and how I don't believe this is a new thing. I want to show you something. I've never really heard someone teach this, and I'm not, again, this is not something I'm saying I have the secret answer. What I want to do is show just the community this, and I want comments for this one. I would love to hear from any teachers. I would love to talk to someone about this one day. But in Micah 5, we have this. I had to go to it. I'll probably put that up here on the screen. But in Micah 5, it's this messianic prophecy. It's an end times passage, and it's about the king of the north. And Micah, he's called the Assyrian. But we read this. So he will be our peace. Earlier, it talks about probably the initial coming of Jesus when he's human form and he's struck on the cheek. But here in verse 5, it kind of bleeds over into the final invasion from the king of the north. And he says, he, this is Jesus, will be our peace, or be their peace, excuse me. When Assyria invades our land, when it marches against our fortresses, we will raise against it 7 shepherds, even 8 leaders of men. So there's 7 shepherds, 8 leaders of men. And in the book of Revelation, we read after the 7th seal, there's these 7 angels given 7 trumpets, but then there's an 8th angel who's given a golden censer filled with the prayers of the saints. And it goes up to the altar and it releases these judgment events. So there's 7 angels, even an 8th with a golden censer. And I actually think this is the same story. It is, after all, an end times passage, but look who they're targeting. They will shepherd the land of Assyria with the sword. So it's not like they're shepherding in peace. It's like, no. They're bringing a sword to Assyria. The land of Nimrod with a drawn blade. So he will rescue us from Assyria when it invades our land, when it marches against our territory. This is the Ezekiel 38, Gog of Magog coalition. These are the nations that have come against Israel. And the nations that came against Egypt. Because remember, Egypt goes to war with this man, and they don't win. He brutally takes over Egypt as well. And the coalition from there comes into Israel in one final assault with Jerusalem completely surrounded. This is targeting that man and his system. Because the Antichrist will be both a man and his nations, plural. This coalition he leads. Empire, if you will. All right, so Revelation 8. Remember, in Revelation 7, it's still part of the 6th seal. You see the sealing of the 144,000. People are being gathered. They're singing and worshiping from every tribe, nation, and language. And this is where it gets a little complicated. Again, do the trumpets overlap? They could. I don't think they do. And if you favor this sequential order of things, some of this can make sense. When you look at it, it's like trumpet 5, these locusts and these demonic creatures, all of these other things, something like a mountain ablaze was cast into the sea. These are literal events. And some of them have some even New Testament backdrops to it. I'll show you what I mean. But first, let's go to the first trumpet and just read this. Remember, the Antichrist being the target of this. The first angel blew his trumpet. Hail and fire mixed with blood was hurled to the earth. So 1/3 of the earth was burned up, 1/3 of the trees were burned up, and all the green grass was burned up. Now, does this include the whole earth? No, I don't think so. It's just targeting the earth in that it hits the earth at a certain location. Be like a meteor striking the earth. It was thrown to the earth, but it hit at a certain point and affected the immediate area. It doesn't have to affect the whole globe. Now No doubt. I mean, look at the world we live in. You can be watching me from who knows where. We're going to witness this event. The return of Jesus is a complex series event, and it takes time, and it can be difficult to understand. There's a great book called Sinai to Zion. You should go read that. That's a wonderful book. But look what also is being targeted. Vegetation. This could include crops, grass, trees, and anything in between. Targeting the Antichrist and his system. And this will be over a large swath of land, no doubt. This is going to be a huge region. You think Middle East, North Africa, the Ezekiel 38 map. It's that whole area, and that will affect the whole world and to some degree. And these will escalate in nature. When we get to the bowls of wrath, it just gets wider. The whole series of events, it broadens in its scope. But the first trumpet, trees, grass, and everything in between. The second trumpet, the second angel blew his trumpet, and something like a mountain, ablaze with fire, was hurled into the sea. So a third of the sea became blood. A third of the living creatures in the sea died, and a third of the ships were destroyed. What's he talking about here? You remember when Jesus, right before going into Jerusalem, I think this was in, let me look at it. I don't want to do this wrong. I believe it was Mark, but it might even be it might be in Luke. Mark 11:23. Forgive me, that's such an easy one to remember. Mark 11:23, and he tells his disciples, like, guys, if you will speak to this mountain and tell it to be cast into the sea, it will be done for you. Well, as we see here, just exited out of my scripture here, but as we see here in the book of Revelation, in this second trumpet, there's something like a mountain, all ablaze, cast into the sea. I personally believe Jesus will actually do the thing he told them they could do. He's going to come back and he's going to say, mountain, be set ablaze and be cast into the sea. And some angel's going to carry this out. They're going to blow the trumpet. It's going to happen. Or maybe this is something that it's happening because he said it back then. Could be prophesying over it. And I tend to believe that he is prophesying over it when he says something like that. And I believe this is that. But it's being cast into the sea. And look what it affects. It says, a third of the sea became blood. A third of the living creatures in the sea died. And a third of the ships were destroyed. I think this is like the Antichrist with his navy. He's going to have navies. And maybe some of the other nations that are gathered together will have ships, battleships, warships, cruisers, things like that. And he's like wiping a third of them away. Again, this is it's like a military counterattack. Remember it's the book of Amos, and he's talking to Tyre and Sidon. Go read the book of Amos. It really tells you about a lot of the lands that are going to hit judgment from God when he returns. This is another reason why a lot of these events are targeting the nations that come against Israel. I think the book of Amos is a great read before you even get into this. Go read Amos, actually. I might do a little clip before I hop on with this video and kind of add a second snippet of telling you guys where to go read. Micah 5, Amos, all of these scriptures point us to the Middle East, even when God's wrath is poured out. It's like a Middle Eastern, North African event still. The third angel blew his trumpet, and a great star, blazing like a torch, fell from heaven. It fell on a third of the rivers and springs of water. The name of the star is wormwood, and the third of the waters became wormwood. So many of the people died from the waters because they had been made bitter. And I've seen a lot of people use Chernobyl, which loosely means wormwood, and they have to go through a couple different languages to try to find it and connect the dots there. I don't think this is talking about that. I think this is a star, or maybe a meteor, a comet, if you will. Some people think Apophis is going to be this. Guys, I have no idea. I mean, it doesn't seem to be hinting to me that Apophis, there's like a small chance it could hit the earth. It doesn't mean it can't. I don't think it has to be Apophis. There's just certain things about this passage. To me, it's a literal event. Something from the sky is going to fall and hit. It's going to poison rivers and poison things. The drinking water. So you have the vegetation. You have the ships in the ocean. Now you have drinking water being affected. And it's escalating. It's getting worse. And we're going to finish with the fourth one. We're going to go back we're going to do the fifth and the sixth in a later video and probably save the seventh trumpet by itself. But in the fourth one, the fourth angel blew his trumpet, and a third of the sun was struck, a third of the moon, and a third of the stars, so that a third of them were darkened. A third of the day was without light, and also a third of the night. Guys, it's still January 2025. It's January 30th. It's been January all year long for some reason. Earlier this year, God bless the people in California. I've been praying for them a lot. North Carolina, too. Don't forget about North Carolina, Tennessee, and the Amish. Wow. The MVPs of 2024 and early 2025, it belongs to the Amish. And I love SGA from Oklahoma City Thunder, but the Amish are the MVPs. There was a picture shared in Los Angeles from these fires where the sky is almost just completely dark, and it's a very dark red, and the sun is almost completely blocked out. Like a third of its light was even shining through this smoke. You see in times of war and conflict how smoke can arise and block out the sun. If you've seen volcanoes, like massive eruptions shooting all the sulfur and ash into the air, and it blocks out the sun. There's so many examples of this. When Jesus comes, there's so many descriptions of him coming like fire. He's engulfed in flames. That produces smoke. In the Exodus, he would lead the Israelites through the desert in the pillar of cloud or like a fire by night. It's this hot, radiating light that's creating smoke that's being produced around him. That's probably creating a cloud, which can charge up the atmosphere, and it drops lightning, maybe even hail. However this works, it is a massive event that will block out the sun. It's literal. Also, since I favor the consecutive model, the resurrection's already begun. People are being changed in the blink of an eye, and they're unaffected by this, but they're able to see it and witness to it. And the nations, no doubt, outside of the Middle East, like over here in the United States, this will affect us too in some way, and we're going to be able to watch this. If you're not in a resurrected body, you're going to be able to see this. The whole world will feel the weight of this event. And again, when we get to the bowls, things are going to escalate in nature. But to me, it's a mystery. I don't see any hint in the Bible about how he's going to judge Mexico or the United States or Canada or Brazil or Argentina. No doubt he has his plans. And no doubt that when we get to the bowls, you can see the effect of these things broadens in their scope. But how we're dealt with way over here, or the people who aren't resurrected way over here, I don't know how that's going to work out. In the millennial reign, we we read about people still dying. It's like, well, if it will be as it was before, if they die at 150, it'll be considered a tragedy. They died young. That will be like the millennial reign of Christ. And we'll get into that, later on in the book of Revelation. So, that's a bit of a mystery to me. But this is going to be like what we saw in California, but bigger. Bigger. This will eclipse anything that's ever come before it. In Daniel 12, after we read in verse 45 of Daniel 11, the Antichrist meets his end with none to help him. And then you flip over to Daniel 12, and it begins with the phrase, "at that time." Then it talks about Michael. And then it mentions another distress. So we just went through the tribulation in the book of Daniel 11. And now it says a time of distress such as the world has never seen before and will never see again. This will never happen again. This type of distress and severity, it won't happen again. I think this is the beginning of that. We also come into the bowls of wrath, but the nations will be terrified. There's another prophet who talks about like everyone's face growing pale and their legs are going to be wet with urine. People going to pee themselves, guys. It's a scary event. Remember, it's a great and terrible day of the Lord. There is none like it. It's a day of darkness and gloom. And then again, as we mentioned before, there's still this offer of mercy during that time, because God says, even now come to me. This is a Joel 2. Even now come to me. Tear your hearts, not your garments. It's always about your heart. That's why the timing of this, I don't think we need to get too bogged down in. Where's your heart at through all of this? Where is your heart? Are you judgmental? Because like I mentioned the California fires and how some of my, well, I wouldn't call them friends, people I've seen on social media talk about, and even I had a little bit of this. I had to check myself, almost like God had to kind of stop me. And it was like, yeah, look at them. They made fun of God. Look at all that suffering. And then you stop and you think like, wait, every city I've known, even in states I grew up in, has a red light district. Even I've taken part in this culture at times in my past. I am no better, and let us not be. So here's an analogy I want to give. And maybe I'll close with this and we'll read the last verse here in the fourth trumpet. But I'll close maybe with this a little bit of an analogy. You have a dad and you have two younger brothers. Well, two younger brothers, one younger and one older. The younger brother does something wrong. Let's say dad told him, oh, not to go out at night. Well, he goes out at night, he comes back, and dad's like, hey, I told you not to do that. And the son gets a little bit of an attitude with him, like, I wanted to do it anyway. And the dad's like, that's it. Go to your room and wait for me there. And he comes in. I'm a little old school. I don't have any kids. But he takes a belt and he says, all right, son, I'm going to give you a whooping. You know, he's not going to bruise the son, but he is going to let him feel it a little bit. Whop, whop. Sorry. Oh, I had to laugh. Whop, whop. And then the older brother walks in and sees it, and he starts laughing at the younger brother and starts making fun of him and says, ha, ha, you deserve it. You deserve it. I'm the better son. And the dad goes, he's mid-swing, and he stops, and he goes, wait, what did you just say? Now, let me look at you guys. He goes, wait, what did you just say? Come over here for a second. Young, I'm just going to call him young brother. Luigi? No, it's Mario. Mario's the younger. Mario, you can go. You can go. Go to your room. Older brother, Luigi, come here for a second. What? Dad, I didn't do anything wrong. And he said, you are mistaken, son. You did do something wrong. Your younger brother was wrong, and I was disciplining him. You had an opportunity to minister to your brother and to teach him wisdom and to show him grace. But instead, you were haughty and judgmental and arrogant. Bend over. You get twice as many lashes. God operates like that with his people sometimes. Don't be the judgmental one. Be more like Habakkuk in Habakkuk 3. In wrath, Lord, remember mercy. This is like all the prophets. If you actually studied the prophets, there is a heart of mercy that grows within inside of you. The Holy Spirit will show you some of your own things that you need to deal with. And you become more merciful and graceful. Maybe not nice, but kind. You know, it will give you that kind of wisdom. So don't be like the older brother that comes in with a judgmental attitude. All right, let us not be. It's a scary thing to fall into the eyes of a holy and just God and to find yourself unworthy because even though you thought you were. So just keep that in mind. I might have gotten off track. Let me finish here. Verse 13 from the fourth trumpet. This is that second little sentence here. I looked and heard an eagle flying overhead, crying out in a loud voice, woe, woe, woe. This is like, damn. That's not a curse word. This is woe. This is heavy. This is heavy, heavy language. And I have to almost express it and like act through it. It's heavy, heavy, heavy. That's how it's meant to be understood. This isn't like a pleasant thing. God's not like super joyful. All right, I get to judge the earth. This is something he doesn't want to do, but he will do because he is just. This is like when you're a kid and if you watch Dragon Ball Z, I know, blasphemy, I guess, but you watch this tyrant, this evil dictator that's very powerful, kill Goku's son, almost kill his best friend. They make you think he's dead for a moment. And he's about, not his son, his best friend. And then it's been a while. And then he's almost going to kill Goku's other like close friend. And then he's going to try to kill his son and Goku snaps. His hair lights on, like almost like it lights on fire. He's shining. He's radiating an aura. The sky goes dark. There's an earthquake. I showed a clip in one of my videos, and hopefully people aren't offended. I'm not. And everything's shaking around him. And it's like reminiscent of what you read about in the Bible. But in the Bible, it's real. Jesus comes back. He's radiating like the sun. He's producing heat, like I said before. The sky is darkened. The earth is reeling like a drunkard. There's all kinds of chaos going around, and yet he's perfectly calm. And he's filled with wrath and anger. Still calm at the same time, but filled with wrath and anger towards the enemies of him, the enemies of his people. But it's against the corruption. So this woe, woe, woe to those who live on the earth because of the remaining trumpet blasts that the three angels are about to sound. It's about to get worse. But it's targeting, like I said, the Antichrist, his system. Think of so today in 2025, January 30th, there are more slaves today than at any other point in human history. It's not even close. That's per capita. That's not just in total. That's like on average. And the majority of them are sex slaves. If you've seen someone like Mel Gibson's recent work, they're trying to expose this stuff with sex trafficking. It's even here in the United States. millions and millions, maybe even more than millions of not just little girls, some little boys too, that the world has never seen their face, unknown people that God knows. And when he shows up, he has a thing or two to say towards their captors. He has a thing or two to say towards them, and it isn't pretty. It's a hostile takeover against all of the corruption, all of the things that people go to war for that force the poor to have to suffer over it. There's wars going on today, and you get rich people who go to war. I forget whose quote this is. We get rich people who go to war, but it's the poor people who have to fight it and have to suffer through it and get killed by it. While the rich, and it's not like all rich people are evil. That's not the case. David was a king. He was rich. So it's not, and Abraham was rich. So it's not that being rich is necessarily evil. But there's this theme that a lot of the elites of the world are causing people to suffer intentionally to gain more power. God has a thing or two to say towards them. All this is directed at that. And ultimately, the Antichrist himself and his coalition and the people who have taken the mark will be on the receiving end of this primarily. And the world is going to see this and have a chance at the very last moments to still repent. Again, Joel 2, even now come to me. This is a prophecy concerning the end times. Even now come to me. You can apply it now, but it still applies then in the future. I think that's really more of the heart at. So again, I don't want to get too bogged down with timing of everything. The heart of this is repent. Repent. Look what he is going to do to the unrepentant. Look what he is going to bring towards the Antichrist and that murder, bloodlust intent that he brings, the evil one brings. God is going to answer that in a hostile takeover as a divine, righteous warrior king. Remember when Simba goes against Scar? This is Simba. This is Luke Skywalker. This is Goku. This is Superman. This is this is Aragon. This is the Lord of the Rings. This is the Chronicles of Narnia, whatever that lion's name is. What's his name? Whatever his name is. And they kill the Wicked Witch. This is the end of Wizard of Oz, the Wicked Witch of the West. I'll get you, my pretty. And your little dog, too. Nope. Not at all. No, you won't. You might think you will. You'll get close, and God will allow that. But he puts a stop to it. Eventually, there's enough. All of this is targeting that. I know a lot of people think, well, God's a violent God. I don't know why anyone would believe in a God that's going to do this to people. I'm like, you guys aren't thinking. You have a heart of justice. That evil in the world needs to ultimately be dealt with. And here's the good news. It will. It hasn't happened yet. But in the end, evil for sure will be dealt with, done and gone. They will beat their swords into plowshares. They will learn war no more. They're turning military equipment into farming equipment. We're going to tend to the earth, restore it. It's all about resurrection and redemption and going back to the land of Eden, that happily ever after where Simba, the rightful king, is now in place and the kingdom becomes righteous and beautiful. This is the end of Zootopia. It's a happily ever after ending, but it comes with a war, and the good side wins. Anyway, I'll leave that there. We're going to talk about the fifth and the sixth trumpet. Get ready because that one is bizarre. And then we're going to get into the seventh trumpet. I am going to do another video on just a kind of a standalone video where I'm going to talk about, I'm going to go through, I don't know, I'm workshopping the title. I'm also workshopping the name of this show, so please pray for me. I'm going through some changes. This should be a good time to say thank you to the people in Tyler, Texas. I can't say all the names. I can't remember everyone. I can remember a few. I just don't want to leave anyone out. But they were some of the most beautiful people. I've one of the best weekends I've ever had. I got to meet some of my favorite teachers. I got to sit up with them. I felt so unworthy. I had to remind myself that these are just people. These are men and humans like me. They're not God. I had to keep reminding myself. But I was so blessed. It was in Tyler, Texas, the Shepherd's Heart Ministries, and they had an End Times Prophecy Conference. And it's really motivated me. It's encouraged me a lot. So I wanted to thank you guys if you're watching this. And I wanted to ask you all who are watching this to pray for them, that they can continue the good work, continue to bring the gospel forward, that God would continue to use them, and pray for their health too. I'm sorry, the video. Yeah, I'm going to go through the story of Ezekiel 38:39. I'm going to parallel it with Daniel 11, verse 21 to the end of Daniel 12. I was going to go then to the Olivet Discourse and then to the book of Revelation, but as Dr. Alan Kushner posted on X, 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, along with the Olivet Discourse, and then the book of Revelation. I think I'm going to probably call it something like the same story told over and over. And there's probably even other areas where that story might be told, but they're all the chronological events of the end times, and they're all the same story. Okay? So pray about that. We'll see when that one's done. I might work on that one for a while. But I love you guys. Come on back for the 5th and 6th trumpet in this series. Go back and watch the beginning. I hope you're not just jumping into stuff and not getting the full idea of it, okay? Maranatha. God bless.